ReefDudes is sponsored by Brightwell Aquatics and Bulk Reef Supply.
Today, it's all about rock flower anemones. What's going on, guys? Devin from ReefDudes. Now, I've been receiving a ton of questions lately about rock flower anemones, about spawning them, keeping them, placement, so today we're going to dig a little deeper into it.
Rock flower anemones, or RFAs for short, are an extremely easy soft coral that originates from the Caribbean. Now, part of their beauty is they look like very colorful underwater flowers. Now, I'd argue they're one of the easiest anemones to keep, especially in a mixed reef environment. If you think about something like a bubble tip, they're considered easy, however, they tend to trample over all your acros eventually, where rock flowers tend to stay put a little more. Now, rock flowers can walk around like any other anemone, however, I find they tend to move much less, especially once they find a spot to plant their foot. So rock flowers tend to favor a sand bed rather than a bare bottom tank. They'd really like to have something to bury their foot into, but then again, they will happily plant their foot into a little hole or a cubby inside of a rock, and once they do, they really do tend to stay in place. Now, they come in many different color morphs, ranging from a very basic solid red or green to stripies, multicolored, bullseyes, war paint patterns. The price is fairly inexpensive for a basic red or green, and they can get pretty crazy pricey for the more exotic and multicolored morphs. Care-wise, I consider them to be very easy and adaptable to a variety of different tank conditions. I've had them in super low flow, super high flow, low light, super high light, so bottom of the tank, top of the tank, all over the place, and I find they can adapt to almost anything. Parameter-wise, they don't seem overly picky, so that makes them really easy, especially for a beginner. And even an advanced course alike, right? It just adds a lot of color and beauty to your tank. Feeding wise, now they have very sticky tentacles, which they use to capture food and move it towards their mouth. So generally, I just broadcast feed the tank and just let them catch whatever they can, and they've always been pretty darn happy with that. Rock flowers are not fragable. They propagate sexually by spawning. So if you want to expand your collection, you're going to need to have both a male and a female. Now, I haven't really found an easy way to sex them. So the best odds are just have a bunch of them, and the odds are you'll have a male and a female. So if you only have two, you might not be there. I'd want to probably go for at least 5 or so just to make sure you got a nice mix in there. Now, the only way I've really found to fully sex one is see a male spawn. When it does, it looks like it's kind of smoke's coming out of its mouth, and what it's doing is releasing sperm into the water column. And if there's a female nearby that's ready for it, she'll be fertilized. Their spawning cycle is influenced by factors such as water temperature, lighting intensity, lunar cycles, time of the year, food availability, and I find it tends to happen more frequently in spring and fall. I've also found that feeding heavily with stuff like phytoplankton, cannabis, and mysis really help to make sure they're healthy and ready for it, and it definitely aids in spawning. Now, something like a temperature change from a water change can actually help trigger it, because that temperature shift could kind of trigger their internal seasonal spawning instinct. Now, once they spawn, it takes about 6 to 8 weeks until you'll see any babies. And when the babies come out, they're ultra tiny little dots, and they tend to hide under the petals of the parents. Now, when they first come out, they're usually fairly clear, so you might not even see that color. And then as they age, they'll get more and more colors, and you'll see these little dots of color all around them. And once they get a little bit bigger, they tend to start venture out from under the parents. But at first, they're just going to be these little tiny dots under the petals. And if you want the greatest chance at success for the babies to survive, you want to feed them some very small particle food, like something like ReefDudes, or is something super tiny. Now, one question I've gotten answered a ton of times is, can a rock flower eat fish? Well, I've kept over 50 in a 20-gallon tank with mandarin, royal gamma, firefish, issue-free. You can barely see the sand bed, there's so many rock flowers, so in my personal opinion, I'd say they're perfectly safe for a healthy fish.
So hopefully you guys learned something about rock flowers. They're awesome corals to keep, super easy, and a great addition to add a lot of color to your reef tank. If you guys enjoyed this, hit that like button. If you're new, make sure you subscribe. I'll catch you guys on the next update.